But that kind of stuff is so weird for me. You like literally you go to bed, you have a chat, and you wake up, but you didn't touch anything, and then something's different. You're like, what? How does that? How does that work?
Computers, but I swear they just flip and literally they're robots already. They have mind of their own. You know what I mean?
But you oaks are tapping into that stuff, having a look.
Yeah. I know, but tell me about
remote. They got the remote eye watching us.
Yes, but I swear they do. Ashlyn, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Yeah, very good, thank you.
Ashlyn, how's it going? Woo!
Good. Pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, this is
Lovely to meet you, Ashlyn. How's it going?
Really good.
cool, man. I literally got a reminder on Facebook, and it was like, yeah, you and Ashlyn have been friends for 6 years. Did you get it as well?
I got that as well. I thought it
Nice.
was very coincidental.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, it's weird how this world works.
That's how amazing travel is sometimes, like you don't always have to be constantly friends, but like friends, there's different forms of friendship, and like, yeah, it's just so cool that you can connect again and go, remember how cool that was, or, awesome.
Yeah, share an experience and then connect again later with different, but things that still match up. So, absolutely.
Yeah, super cool.
I think I'm pretty open, and if we do come across something, I'll let you guys know, and you can always cut it, but I pretty much talk about anything and everything, so it's all fair game.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Sounds good.
Guys, I also have to just throw this in there that, as you know, Gareth, in Australia, the internet is just a little bit average. And I can just tell there's a little bit of like weirdness happening today. Like in terms of, there's a small chance that I'd say, look, I'm going to just come back on the call, if you know what I mean. So if that happens, you can just continue or whatever. I'll just come back on, or okay, just so you guys know.
Okay, my man, no worries. Have you been on any other podcasts at all?
I have. I did a podcast, The Liberated Woman.
Okay,
she actually podcasts out of Saskatchewan here, and she's been doing it for about 2 years now.
Cool.
So I've done one with her, and then I've just been listening to a lot of podcasts recently too.
Yeah,
but no, I love what you guys are doing, and I've loved kind of following along too, and
Cool,
and seeing some of your social media stuff. So I can't wait to see where you guys are going to take it.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Man. I
Yeah,
appreciate
we're pretty
that.
excited.
Thanks so much, Ash. And thanks to what a flippin' kiff chat, man.
Cool, hey, bud.
Yeah, what a kiff chick, man. Really, really kiff.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
much flippin' value in that one, actually. Like, lots.
Yeah, I think so. Definitely. Like,
some like amazing quotes of hers, like, this is doing what it takes, like whatever, things like that.
So much of that,
Like a lot of the stuff you were going to ask was like exactly what I wanted to know, like the conservation, and those were really cool questions,
Yeah, I wanted to ask her a bit more about, like, say, organic farming and stuff like that.
Totally.
But then we moved
Antarctica.
away. I was just like, look, there's just so much going on, like
much.
But that's the cool
floating.
thing as well.
I wanted to ask you, like, just random stuff, like, yes.
Yeah. I mean,
that's gift. That means that's a good chat. There's a lot of interesting shit to chat about.
Yeah, so much interesting stuff, and that's why I was like, I tried to mention at the end. I was like, people, please make sure you go and read the blog because it is so fascinating.
But there was another moment where you read my mind because I was thinking the same thing. I was like, you just have to go on the blog. Like, there's just too much interesting shit to not go on and check it out.
Yes, yeah.
That's a gift.
What's up, Gareth?
Hey, Gregor, how's it going, my man?
Yes, I'm pretty awesome, man. How about you, buddy? How's your day been?
Yeah, it's been really good, thank you, bud. I had this small victory this morning. Like, my kitchen sinks have been like semi-blocked for a couple of weeks now. Water's slowly been trickling out of them, and after numerous attempts of different things, I eventually found out that leaves were blocking the drain outside, and I managed to clear it. So the sinks now drain water well, and but it's so funny. Like, I'm not a good one with my hands. Like, I'm no handyman, that's for sure. So, like, today was a sweet little victory for me.
Well done, man.
Thanks, man. How was your day?
It's like, funny enough, I had a similar thing happen. I had to replace the battery in my car, and I didn't have the right tool, and I was like a bit frustrated. And I'm definitely not one that is also like super practical. And when you get it done and you sort it out, it's like you just feel a little bit more like manly on some level,
Yeah.
And it's like we're just so stoked when you get it done. So, but some people are like so practical, and our guest today, Ashlyn George, is one of them. She grew up on a farm, and she just operates with that kind of stuff. Hey.
Yeah, tell me about it, bud. I think, yes, when you grow up like on a farm and in the outdoors, you just learn so much about practical things in life. You know what I mean? And it's classic when she tells us how she basically, she didn't, she wanted to save money for her travels. So instead of taking her car for a service, to change the alternator, she literally did it herself. I mean, like, it just, to me, I'm like, what is an alternator? Don't even know what the thing is, but never mind changing it.
But you know what? That's totally. She just emanates this passion for travel, and nothing gets in the way of her passion for it. And that's one of her things, is like sometimes she just has to do things a certain way so that she can actually pay for her travels and budget for them. And she's also not only like fixing her own stuff, which is really amazing to both of us, but also she also says no to people and her friends, which in certain scenarios can be quite tough. But she's so, like I said, so congruent with what she wants to do, that enables her to be able to say no to certain things, like not just going for that coffee every morning or whatever it may be. And I just think that's like just a big lesson for all of us. Like sometimes you just got to make decisions now for the bigger picture, and then you can actually experience all those cool things that you want to do. But there's often a balance.
Yeah, absolutely. She's so good at planning and kind of knows what she wants in life. You know what I mean? She knows what her priorities are, and she does make difficult decisions at times. And like you said, says no, but makes suggestions on things too, you know. So instead of like going for a coffee with her friends, they'll go for a walk somewhere and catch up that way. So she has, she just really knows how to make the best decision for her in her life, and that helps her achieve her goals, you know. And like you said, her passion is travel and experiences, and to do that, she knows what she needs to do to get there. And yes, when it comes to adventure and really seeing the world and learning about it, she absolutely takes it next level, doesn't she? I mean, you just look at her blog, for example, and everything she's done. She really has learned so much about the world, cultures, and herself in her explorations, that you kind of think sometimes, oh, maybe that's how we should educate ourselves instead of going to university or something like that.
Yeah, 100%. And what you say there is actually literally what she did, eh? Like and part of what you mentioned as well, she really plans her future and her trips and, you know, the bigger picture and also the macro and the micro stuff. And in that scenario, she decided, I went to university for X number of years, and that gave me a certain sort of understanding of the world. And now I should be able to travel for the same amount of time because I'm going to learn something differently. And to me, that's just like, you know, just shows how organized and how she actually thinks things through. But she totally has lived an amazing life, and it doesn't all just happen. It's all planning, it's hustle. She puts herself out there, and she actually makes things happen. A lot of people, I think, have this rosy idea of a travel blogger, and it is. I mean, she has an extraordinary life, but she really, really plans and executes really, really well.
Yeah, 100%. And I also think she's a super brave person. You know, she puts herself out there, and she travels solo often, and that's part of the learning experience too. You know what I mean? Putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, and she tells us a lot about that as well in a lot of her adventures. So yeah, I think it's a fantastic chat. We really enjoyed it, and now it's a good time for us to hear from Ashlyn what it's like for her to be ridiculously human.
All right, 1, 2, 3, record.
Oh.
Nice.
Hey there, how's it going, Ashlyn George? How you doing? Good to see your face again.
It is so amazing to join you guys today. I can't wait to chat with you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no,
likewise.
It's our absolute pleasure. I think it's been 6 years actually since we first met, and now we're on a podcast together. It's just it's really quite awesome how the world works, isn't it?
It comes full circle when you least expect it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, cool. So how's your day been so far? I know it's a Sunday afternoon. It's probably pretty cold where you are. What's been on the agenda for you today?
It's been a pretty busy week with work. I've been doing lots of writing for a variety of different clients, and I've got another busy week coming up. So I didn't really take much of the weekend off, just a lot of working. But it's a beautiful sunshiny day out, and it's seasonally warmer than usual in December. So I've been getting out and doing a lot of running to take advantage of it too, which is nice.
Cool. So that nice light on your face now is actually sunlight coming in there.
Yeah, it's mid-afternoon here, so
nice.
It'll be disappearing in about an hour because we get some pretty early evenings here. But yeah.
And what sort of temperature do you have at the moment?
So it's just a few degrees below 0 Celsius. So normally it's like -20, -30 this time of year. So it is gorgeous out.
Wow, yeah.
That's a lot warmer, hey?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've lost all our snow, actually. I'm usually out cross-country skiing right now, but I'm back to hitting the pavement because it's all just melting. So we might not even have a white Christmas this year.
No.
Wow, how weird would that be?
Very, very different.
Wow.
Yeah, that's...
And so what kind of sport are you doing then at the moment? Or are you just taking a run or a jog?
Yeah, right now I'm just running. I've been doing some winter camping on the weekends because it is only -5, -10. But usually I like to hit the cross-country ski trails and get out and do a couple kilometers.
It always makes me laugh inside. For our reference point growing up in South Africa is 0 is madness. It's cold. If it goes anywhere near that, we freezing cold. And I can't imagine camping in -10, and that's it's a pretty balmy day out there. Let's get on. Everyone's reference points are different.
Even from other Canadians, I've had multiple people in my social media channels being like, how are you doing this? What are you doing? And I joke that it's just like summertime. You just have less mosquitoes to have to deal with.
Awesome.
And do you find that your phones and stuff stop working when it's that cold?
That is the biggest challenge. I actually will remove the batteries for most of my tech gear, and I won't even just tuck them into pockets. I'll usually have them pressed against my skin to keep them warm, or I'll use little warm hot paws to keep everything warmed up because otherwise it gets too cold and your tech gear doesn't work.
Yeah.
And do you have issues with lenses and stuff getting all weird and that kind of thing as well, or is that
it's usually
not really
pretty good. I can leave my camera, say, in the tent overnight, and I'll just pocket the batteries and put it back in the next day. And usually it's not too bad. It's just the batteries, usually.
Yeah. And it's basically just about being prepared and just knowing that that's going to happen, and then just,
and just managing it. And you learn your lessons every time you go out. There's something new you're learning. You're like, oh, I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't do this next time. I've learned better for next time. And you figure it out. Trial by error.
Yeah.
So when you say camping, do you mean glamping, or do you mean real camping?
Camping, an actual, and it's not even a 4-season tent, just a 3-season tent, a sleeping bag, cooking over a fire, and a little shovel to move the snow out of the way when you need to.
And you just go out and do it for fun, by yourself or with mates,
I usually take different friends out with me, whoever else is up for an adventure like that. And then we tie it into exploring the area. So I might go hiking or snowshoeing, go looking for wild animals, elk, otters, whatever's in the area. Or like last weekend, it was more of a cross-country skiing camping adventure. So we went cross-country skiing at 3 different sites and just took advantage of that, and then finished off with some ice fishing later on that Saturday evening.
Oh, it's like just an average day out.
A little bit for me anyway, I guess.
That's so classic. Like, but what is it literally? I mean, you put your stuff in your car and you go to like a random place, or is it somewhere that like people often go? I mean, is it just so massive you can explore wherever you want? How does it work?
There's a little bit of both in Canada. So I'm from Saskatchewan, which a lot of people aren't familiar with that. It's a province in the middle of Canada. Lots of people skip over it. They'll go to Vancouver, Toronto, and miss the prairies. But actually half of the province, as is most of Canada, is covered by the boreal forest. So I love to venture into the forest any chance I get. So it's actually tricky to find great facilities in the wintertime to camp at. So you can either go backcountry, and I would ski in or hike in and haul all my gear. So carry it in a backpack like hiking. And then you might take a sled because your sleeping bag's a little bit bigger. You need winter boots. You need maybe an extra blanket to stay warm versus some of the ultra lightweight stuff. But then one of the most convenient ways to winter camp is just like car camping. And so you can leave some of your outdoor stuff in the backseat of your vehicle, and then you just use what you need in the tent and your camp kitchen. And that's more convenient because sometimes if the provincial park here, Prince Albert National Park, they actually supply wood. So you have to split it into tinier pieces, but you don't actually have to go find a felled tree and chop it up into pieces. So you can do both. Backcountry is a lot more effort, and you have to make sure you have really warm but lightweight gear to haul it all in on your own back. So car camping is pretty convenient, but not a lot of other people are winter camping around here either. The outdoorsy people are, but a lot of people are really interested in what I'm up to because they've never done it before, but they might like to try on the warmer winter days.
That's the beauty of Instagram. I can sit at home in my warm house and go, wow, that looks amazing in the snow. But I'm quite happy in my lounge where it's warm or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly. But you'd be surprised how much warmth the fire can give off in the middle of a cold night. And that's the biggest, I think the most important thing. As soon as you get to a campsite, you just immediately start a fire, and then you put up everything else that you need to, because you can always stop and warm up at the fire and then continue putting your campsite together. So. And
are you able to sort of free camp anywhere in Canada or in Saskatchewan, or does it have to be like a designated camping area?
So we do have designated camping areas, and actually there are campgrounds in, say, the national park here, but they allow you to kind of free camp anywhere that's 2 kilometers or more from a roadway. So you can just go find a spot, build your tent. And then obviously pretty much anywhere you want to camp, you want to practice leave no trace principles. And then there is some public land that you are free to go camp on, government owned. But private land, you would have to ask permission from the landowner before you went in there. So depending where you want to go, what you want to do, there's a few different options to look into.
Oh, awesome.
And like when it's say -20 at night, I mean, how do you even sleep? I mean, what sort of sleeping bag are you sleeping in? Is it like some one from outer space or something, just to keep you warm?
If you have a really good sleeping bag, they make sleeping bags that are like $1,000. They're ultra lightweight and they're good to -40. I don't have a budget for that kind of stuff. So I have a few different options. A friend of mine has a -29 sleeping bag, and I borrowed it the other weekend. It's huge. Like, it's not very packable. You couldn't even fit it in a backpack, but it was absolutely luxurious. Like, I didn't even realize I was sleeping outside because it was like maybe -5, -10, and the bag goes to -29. But you can use, say, a -7 bag. Sometimes I'll slip in my +13 bag with the -7 bag, and then I might still bring another lighter blanket. And another really big thing is wearing the right type of clothing to sleep in. So I'll sleep in not too many layers, because sometimes you get sweaty and uncomfortable and then you get chilled, but I'll just wear merino wool pants, wool socks, and then a wool shirt, and then always a toque and like a neck buff. And then I use a mummy style sleeping bag, so you can actually wrap it around your head and like zip yourself inside your sleeping bag, because otherwise it's too cold to leave your head outside in the tent at night.
And you don't wear did you say you wore like a little beanie or something like that, or do you?
Yeah, so a toque is actually a Canadian term. I think the rest of the world, you guys call them beanies, but we call them toques. Yeah. So it's a little woolen hat that covers your head and your ears. And yeah, nice. Very Canadian.
But I guess there's obviously, when you say like you haul in your gear in sometimes, I guess you have to be quite sort of safety aware as well. Like, you're not just going in there and having a it's not just a balmy day out there. You have to be quite careful and plan everything and let people know. So what are the sort of the things that you generally have to be aware of initially when you go camping, like in the winter?
Absolutely. So even so the nice thing about winter camping is you don't have to worry about bears like you would in summertime, because they're all hibernating. But there are other animals that you wouldn't necessarily want to bump into. So certain areas there are packs of wolves, and they're probably not going to bother you, but you just want to be aware that they're in the area. And even I wouldn't want to come across a bull elk or a moose and have them become defensive around me. So you always give wildlife their space, because you just don't know how they're going to react. And when you're in the backcountry, there might not be cell service. So you want to have enough water that you're carrying in, because it does take time to melt water, especially if something happens and you became injured. You would want something easy to access. Lots of dense, nutritious food that's also lightweight to carry. So mixed nuts is always a great one. And then a first aid kit, and usually a multi-tool, a knife, and a hatchet. Axes are too big and heavy to carry in, but those are some pretty standard things. And even the little medical kit that I carry is pretty basic. But then you always tell somebody where you're going, so they have an idea. I always, if I'm in a park, I register with them so they know that there's, one or two people in the backcountry. And then I usually deregister as well, so they know that I made it out safely. But you also have to be aware with the temperature and the weather. There's risk of frostbite, and even just especially when you're hiking or skiing you get really sweaty, right? Because you're working out, you've got a heavy pack on your back. So as soon as I get to a campsite, I actually have a completely different set of clothes that I wear, like everything down to my underwear and sports bra. I change everything, because the second you get a little bit sweaty and damp and then cold, you get chilled, and it's really hard to come back from that. So while I'm still warm, I'm changing out in the snow, putting new clothes on, and then trying to keep my physical activity to a minimum, so I'm not breaking a sweat. You can still do stuff without sweating. So that's probably one of the biggest things, is the warm, dry clothes and not over sweating while you're in your gear. And then just proper layering. So merino wool base, you might put a light shirt over top of it, a hoodie, a jacket, and then you can add scarves and mitts as necessary too. So just always trying to stay warm.
Yeah.
Wow, that's classic. So, it sounds like you've obviously done a lot of this, to gain that sort of experience of what works and what doesn't.
It's surprising. I haven't done a lot of it. This was, I think, only my 4th winter camping experience. I do a lot of camping, and I do a lot of backcountry in the summertime as well. And I actually just started doing a lot of backcountry hiking about a year ago, but I've done probably half a dozen to a dozen different hikes since I started. And so it's just every time you go out, you learn something new, you add a new piece of gear, and you just kind of build up your collection of knowledge and gear you have to take out with you.
It's crazy. People in Australia, obviously there's a lot of camping here as well. And obviously it's very hot, and it's a different thing. But some people have so much gear. Like, I think eskies or all electronic, plug it in. You've got a fridge. You've got crazy how, the sky's the limit if you really want to go there. But I kind of like the idea of you going in with like 5 or 6 things, and off you go into nature. And it just seems like a really minimalistic way of doing it, and probably you leave less of a footprint, I'd imagine, doing it that way, which is kind of cool as well.
Absolutely. And I look at what I take, and it's, it's a pot, it's a stove, it's camp fuel. And then, even my cutlery, it's a spork. So it's a spoon and a fork. And then I just use my multi-tool if I need a knife. And you keep it as basic as possible, because A, you don't want to carry anything more than you need to. And B, it's just nice when you're escaping into nature to not have to haul in your whole life to experience it, you take the bare minimum so you can actually enjoy what nature is while you're there. And that's one of the things I love most, is particularly backcountry camping, because nobody else is usually there. It's just you, and you can have some extraordinary experiences. Actually, this July, I went up into northern Saskatchewan. And so in the middle of summertime in northern Saskatchewan, it's extreme daylight. So at 1 a.m, you can still see the glow of the sun setting. And then the sun starts rising by like 3:30 in the morning. And you also get, the further north you go, you also get the opportunity to see northern lights. So even outside of Saskatoon, which the city I live in now, I can literally walk out to the golf course that I live nearby and can often see northern lights dancing across the sky just from even in the city with the light pollution. But it actually happened to be Canada Day as well. So it was July 1st, and myself and a friend went camping, and it was 1 a.m, and I knew there was going to be a good Northern Lights show. And normally people set off fireworks on Canada Day, and we were skipping that to just go camping. We had the entire campground to ourselves. The Northern Lights were exploding across the sky in the dark, but the sun was still setting. There was a loon calling out and echoing across the lake. There was a beaver swimming across the water in front of me. I'm sitting in like a lawn chair with a beer and my camera snapping away. And I turned around to look back to the campfire, and there's fireflies flickering through the tree. Like, it didn't even feel like it was real. It was one of those moments that you can't believe are happening. And it was literally just my friend and I. We were the only two there experiencing it. It was just so peaceful and wonderful, and this magical moment just happening in northern Canada.
Just hearing that, I don't think it's possible to like orchestrate a more like magical moment in my mind. Like, that's pretty amazing.
And that's how I felt too. And I always tell people, like, I have been very fortunate and have traveled around the world, but you don't actually have to cross borders to experience amazing and wonderful things. You just need to be willing and open to seek them out. So you can do just as many amazing, wonderful things in Saskatchewan as you can in any other country around the world. You just have to get out there and be open to those experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you are the ultimate adventurer, that's for sure. And I mean, your life, especially the last 7 years, have been one huge adventure, and like something we absolutely can't wait to get into. But just also to give the chat a little bit of context, basically you and I met about 6 years ago. I was actually looking, I was like, oh, was it Cambodia or Laos? And then I was like, oh no, it was Laos. And then I was trying to remember the name of the town, and it was Luang Prabang. Because I think you were with Kevin, your friend, and I was with my friend Clive, and we were in Vieng Vieng, that's the name of it, hey, where they have that crazy, like, the tube thing that goes through the river, where like people do silly things because they're drunk and they die, and like it's really quite a crazy cool place though. And then I think we got the same bus up to Luang Prabang. And it was just such a cool city, I thought, Luang Prabang. And anyway, so that's the context of, like, I guess how we know each other. And then bit more about yourself though. So, like, we like to know, as part of the podcast, we like to get to know our guests and like they're a bit more about their upbringing and their childhood. So, you were born in Saskatchewan as well, is that right? And,
yes.
You've kind of lived there your whole life. But can you just explain to us, I guess, what was childhood like for you? A bit more about your family and stuff as well.
For sure. So I think this always surprises people, but I'm not a city girl. I grew up on a grain farm. So I'm a farm girl. I drove a tractor for the city of Saskatoon when I moved into the city for 9 years while I did university and funded my travels. But I grew up on a grain farm. I have 3 older brothers. So I was always used to realizing the value of hard work because I watched my parents do it every single day. And then I helped out on the farm, right? Whether you were in the garden, just weeding everything, or, pulling potatoes at the end of the season because we stored them in our basement so we could, my parents could feed the family throughout the winter time, and you didn't have to buy as much from the grocery stores. And it's really interesting with the food movement in the world today is I just grew up like that, having fresh produce from the garden. I could run out, pick carrots, peas whenever I wanted in the right growing season. And so grew up in a tiny little town. The town I say I'm from has about a dozen people in it. So I'm not joking when I say
12.
teeny tiny.
Wow.
Yeah. And there's more of a community around it too. It's a farming community. So it is a bit bigger, but yeah, the town is very tiny. And the high school I went to, there was 1,000 people in that town. So even the bigger town was still quite small.
Wow.
Yeah, but you learn a lot about community in a small town because everybody knows everybody, supports everyone, and is there for them through good and bad times. So I really appreciated that, whereas in a city, it's a little bit more anonymous. You might not even know your next door neighbor, whereas in a small town, everyone knows everyone.
Yeah.
But yeah, from, when I was 17, I moved up to Saskatoon, which is the city I'm in now. There's about a 250,000 people here, so it's fairly nice size. And I went to university. So I set my life out based on what everybody else around here does. You grow up, go to university, and then after that, the plan is to get a job, a new vehicle, a house, a husband or wife, and then have children, and then just continue your life. So I was working towards that. I went to university. I picked up 2 degrees there. I originally wanted to be a doctor, and then kind of got into university and was like, I didn't know if I wanted that time commitment. And even today, I still kind of dream about being a doctor, but I don't think I'll ever go that route. And so I switched over to education because I really love to learn and share it with others. And so I got an English degree, which is, I guess, where the writing and all the travel blogging and writing that I do today comes into play. And then I got an education degree. And I got really lucky, I guess you could term it. Once I convocated in 2010, I had a teacher who was also a professor set up an interview for me with a school board. She's like, you're perfect for this specific job. Show up, go in like yoga pants, ponytail, don't go in a suit, just keep it really relaxed, go interview. And I walked into the interview. I went through the whole process and it went good. It wasn't great. It wasn't bad. It went okay. But as soon as I walked out of that interview, all what I could think of was, please don't call me to offer the job because I don't want to have to tell you no, but I don't want this job. And thankfully, they never did call me to offer the job, which is a good thing. Because at that time, I was planning my very first solo trip overseas. So prior to this, I had gone to England when I was about 14. My grandfather's from England. So my mom and dad took myself and one of my brothers over there to see where the house he was born in, the tiny town he grew up in, and just connect a little bit more to our own personal family history. And then I had been to Mexico, and then I'd gone back. My oldest brother lives in London as well, and I'd gone back to visit him with my mom. That was the entirety of my travel experience. And then all of a sudden, I'm fresh out of university, and I am planning a 6-month adventure to Australia, New Zealand, and Fiji. So I picked that because it's very easy to travel. You can't tell I'm not Australian until I open my mouth and you hear my Canadian accent, right? And the culture is very similar to Canadian culture as well. Differences, of course, but it wouldn't be too much of a culture shock for me. And in that 6-month period, I learned more about the world and myself, my personality, my dreams, my passions than I had I think I was 21 or 22, in the 22 years prior to that. And I hate saying it because it sounds so cliche now, but travel really did change my life. And, I remember hearing about Southeast Asia, and somebody mentioned Angkor Wat to me in Cambodia, that they really wanted to go to Angkor Wat. And I had no idea what Angkor Wat was. I had heard of Cambodia before, but I knew nothing. So I remember looking it up later online, being like, what is this place this guy was talking about? And I just realized how much of the world there was left to experience and explore. And I knew I needed to see more. I know a lot of people can go on a trip for a week or a month or even take a few months and go backpacking. And of course, they love it and they always want more, but they feel pretty satisfied with it. For me, I needed more. Like I couldn't just have 6 months of travel and that be it. So I actually designed a 5-year travel plan. And my philosophy behind this was if I could spend 5 years learning in an institution in university, I should be able to spend 5 years learning in the world. Now, they're very, very different ways to learn, and both are equally valuable. So I will never, say university isn't valuable, don't go to university. I'll say, by all means, do a tech school education. Any type of education is important, but be open to the variety of ways that you can educate yourself. And it all doesn't have to be in a very formal setting. So I set into place plans and started figuring out how I was going to make this goal and dream of mine happen. And then Gareth, you and I met on my second year of that 5-year travel plan. And so it wasn't easy. And I'm not a wealthy person. Like, my family lives a very modest life. And, I was $40,000 in debt from student loans. And so I needed to figure out, how am I going to pay my student loans off and live and travel at the same time? So I started thinking about how much money I made, how much I needed to travel, and just for people's reference too, when I travel, I budget about 2,000 Canadian dollars a month to travel on. So if you're traveling long term, it's a little bit easier because you're not paying for flights all the time. Flights out of Canada are quite expensive, but flights in, say, Turkey, you can get a flight for $20. In perspective, it could be very cheap there. But I actually tracked, and I still do track, every single penny I've ever spent. And I have, pie charts and flow charts and tables and graphs for every country I've ever been to, and like 50 different currencies showing where all my money goes. So I've tracked it religiously. And I guess I should clarify, with the 5-year travel plan, I didn't travel nonstop for 5 years. I would fly back to Canada. I was very fortunate working with the city of Saskatoon. I worked in a seasonal position that they only hired in the summertime.
Oh, wow.
So I would travel and leave Canadian winters, leave the cold behind. And then I would come back in April or May. I would work for 6 months, and then I would leave again in October. So it was 5 years, but it was kind of a rotating 5-year travel plan.
So you were on the tractor still at this stage, is that right? Is that the job you were doing when you'd go back?
Yes. Yeah, I would come back, and I would, and I operated a variety of different types of machinery. It wasn't just a tractor, but I spent a couple of years on a tractor, and there's a front end loader and a trackless and lawnmowers, and there's a variety of different things. But it paid pretty good. Like, I think I was making up to $24 or $25 an hour by the end of it. And I had health benefits through them, so that saved on travel insurance, because that would also cover me, like, just some really clever things. And it was perfect. They would give me a date I needed to fly home by. And actually, the year I was in Southeast Asia, I was supposed to fly home from Indonesia, but I kind of skipped that, went through Borneo into the Philippines, and rebooked a new flight home. And I flew in at midnight, and was actually back to work at 7 a.m. that morning after being gone for 6 months. Yeah. So I really wanted every minute of travel.
You really stretched it out, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So where did you learn how to drive tractors and these sort of things? Was it on the farm when you were growing up?
So I did do a little bit of that because I had 3 brothers. You could spread out the work that you had to do on the farm. But I grew up driving, the combine on the farm. And today it's a lot different. There is GPS, so it'll keep you in a straight line, and then you just have to turn at the corner. But you do have to understand how to operate some of the equipment. But Dad would get me out there driving it. And then just when I got hired on with the city, you could choose to operate equipment. And I said yes, because it paid more money. And they give you training as well too. But I actually find it easier to drive a tractor than I do to drive a standard vehicle, because we actually only have automatics in Canada for the most part. And then so anytime I was in Easter Island about a year ago, and they only had manual transmissions, and I was like, I don't know if I can actually drive this. So I was stalling out the vehicle all around the island. But yeah, they give on-site training at work too.
Oh wow. And so what kind of farm did you said grain farm your parents had? What kind of grains are we talking?
So some of the standard ones, wheat and canola. So think breads, canola oil, flax. We grow fewer crops now than we used to. Dad used to grow peas and a few other varieties when I was younger. But it depends kind of what you can earn more from. So the last few years has been oats, canola, flax, and wheat as well. So very agricultural based in Saskatchewan here.
And so then I guess the farming community, or the way it works there, is obviously very seasonal. So you have to, if you does it happen that there are bad seasons and things there as well? It's just where it's just horrible, because in the next 6 months, I guess, well, sorry for you anyway. Must be quite tough.
Yeah, absolutely. And so farming is seasonal, but there's always stuff to do in the off season too. So my dad will be hauling the grain. So he stores it in bins in our farmyard. And when it's a good time to sell, he'll haul the grain to the terminal and sell it to them for a certain price. So he's always doing certain stuff and maintenance and upkeep of machinery and lots of off season stuff. But definitely there are, and even actually this year, it was very, very dry in Saskatchewan, but it's a big province and there's farms all over the province, and southern Saskatchewan really, really hit farmers hard. But where my family group or lives in east central Saskatchewan, it wasn't quite as dry. So we had a very great year and some great yields on our crops. But there were other families and areas of in the province where they didn't get a lot out of crops. And there are different things that you can do. Like you can have your own irrigation system. But again, you have to be close to a body of water. They're very expensive to purchase. So hit and miss. And I always joke that farming is a lot like gambling. You never know what you're going to get. You can't control the weather. You can't control the rain, the droughts, the hail that might come through. You could have an amazing crop. And then late in the season, this huge hailstorm comes through and decimates your entire crop. There's nothing you can do. You can buy insurance for it too, but sometimes that's really expensive and sometimes it's not worth it. You have to figure out what fits your business best, but you never know what you're going to get. So I actually appreciated growing up learning from my dad, who took everything pretty well in stride. You know, if it was a great year, he was appreciative of it, but he made the choices in those good years to help him in the harder years when the weather wasn't as good or a big storm came through or whatever it might be. So I think that was a really valuable lesson for me to see is, you know, in the good times, prepare for the times when it's tighter and tougher and be smart about the decisions that you are making as well.
100%.
And can you just like put into perspective in terms of the size when you say farm, like, is it a massive farm? And you know, because if you're driving a combine harvester, for me, that thing is huge and you need a massive farm for them, I guess.
So we have a pretty comfortable size farm here, a couple thousand acres. I wish I could convert acres to something that people could understand a little bit better. But it's, my dad does it on his own now. He used to work with a brother, so it definitely keeps him busy. Like I try to get out and sit on the combine while he hauls grain, or my mom is always out helping on the farm. So we're probably like an average farm size for not having to hire other workers in Canada. Like you can get farms that are 10, 20, 30,000 acres, and those are just huge productions. Like you absolutely need employees helping you run your business. So we're pretty comfortable and average size. I wish I could like give an exact explanation of how much land that is, but I don't have a good comparison in my head right now.
And so you sit like a combine, right? Can you just explain like you sit in this thing? I mean, it must be pretty awesome driving the thing. Like first, how do you even start it? Is it just like a normal car, or how does it work?
It's surprisingly easier than you expect. So combines are these giant machines that they'll pick up. So first off, so you have a crop in the field and it's all standing up. And what you need to do first of all is cut it so it's lying down. And there's two ways you can do it. You can either use a swather that'll go and it has a front. Dad's going to kill me if he listens to this and I use all the wrong terminology.
We'll edit it. Don't worry.
No, we won't.
The swather has like a header on it that spins and that will cut the crop so it's laying it down and put it in these nice swaths. So with the combine, you go and you pick up the swaths and it travels along a belt, and because the grain is ripe in the stalk, it can kind of shake out the seeds because you want the seeds and you don't want any other part of the crop. So it'll like shake out the canola seed or the wheat seed, and then it'll carry it into the back of the combine where it stores it in a hopper in the back. And obviously that hopper gets filled up to dump it into a grain truck. So you have an auger on a combine that you swing out, and you can either unload on the go if you have a farm with a tractor and a grain cart, or you have to actually stop at the grain truck, dump it into the back of the grain truck. Like a grain truck is a semi, or can be a semi, and then you continue harvesting. And so when the seed goes through and gets dumped in the hopper, the rest of it gets spit out the back. So when I was a little kid, I thought of it like eating. The front of the combine eats it, and then the back end of the combine gets rid of the stuff that you don't need. Combines are quite big, so there is a little ladder that you climb up to get into the cab, which sits on top of the rest of the machinery. But the cab is amazing. You have a radio, or you can connect your iPod, and there's all sorts of technology inside. So you have a GPS that actually is in control of steering the combine just to make sure it's the most efficient, especially if you're straight cutting. So instead of using a swather to cut the crop, you can put a straight cutter on the front of the combine, so the combine kind of does it all. So I don't know if that's very descriptive if somebody doesn't know what a combine looks at, but kind of broken it down without using too much technical terminology.
And are you listening to some good country music while you're doing that, or?
Yeah, you really are. That's true. I'm a big country music fan.
Classic.
Listen to audiobooks and podcasts too, because you'll be in the combine for 16 hours a day sometimes, because you don't work sun up to sundown. You work as long as you can. Wow. Because you have such a tight window to get the crop off the field. So it's my dad will, he'll work until 1 or 2 in the morning, and then he'll be back in the field at 4 in the morning sometimes if he can work that long, because it's so important to get it off when you have the opportunity. So pretty intense days sometimes.
So basically, like, what you have, I guess, like maybe a week or so to harvest everything, and that's why you need to work those hours, or is it even shorter than that or longer?
It's a little bit longer. So it can range anywhere from starting in middle of August to right until the middle of November. And the thing that limits harvest is when freezing comes and when the snow flies. So it's really important for crops and the seeds and grain to be dry. And some people, they do have dryers in their bins that can help get the moisture level of the grain to the appropriate level, because when grain heats up, it can actually start on fire and melt things as well. So you have to make sure it's dry so it won't heat up. But yeah, anywhere from the middle of August to the middle of November, and it all depends on if and when the crop is ready and how quickly you can get it off. And so if it does snow, it gets trickier, because obviously the grain and the crop gets wet, and you have to wait for it to dry out, and so you depend on wind and warm temperatures for that. But you just never know what's coming, so you take advantage of every minute you can.
I'm always fascinated by how complicated farming is. We just, we go to the store and we pick up some stuff and we just, we shove it in our mouths, and that's as far as most people think about it. But there's a massive, complicated process on the other end, and we almost never really go there in our minds. And I think it's always good to have that discussion, because you should know where your food's coming from,
Absolutely. And even, I look at the business sense my dad needs to have, but then the knowledge. So even in the spring, when he's deciding what variety of grain to plant and why and what field, and then what to spray it with to keep it from being eaten by different bugs. And there's so much that you have to know and learn. And sometimes you do make bad decisions too, or the wrong decision, or you didn't make the best decision you could. And it's just, you have to always take it as a learning experience and then grow from that, because you can't change it. And it's amazing watching my parents farm, and it's amazing reaping the benefits of it too. People will go out and they'll buy some flaxseed in the store and pay huge amounts of money for it. And I'll be like, hey Dad, can you bring me up a pail of flax this weekend so I can mix it in with my smoothies, or, my bread or whatever I'm doing. So, and I actually didn't realize that was just my lifestyle, and that was normal growing up on the farm. And I didn't realize how fortunate that was to have had that opportunity until I started traveling and realized lots of people grow up in cities and they just go to the supermarket. And of course we go to the supermarket too.
Yeah.
But we also provide a lot of food for ourselves as well. And now as an adult, I really appreciate what my parents did for me. And yeah, it was hard work, but we ate fresh vegetables for as long as we could. Mom would can it or jam and jelly it to preserve it in any way, so we could always be eating food that we had made. And even now, my mom will come up to the city with giant bags of, corn on the cob and squash and potatoes. And every time she comes up, she brings something. And yeah, I didn't realize how amazing that was, because that's just normal around here, until I saw how people struggle to access certain foods around the world as well.
Yeah, it's so awesome. I was going to ask you about that. Like, you know, do you actually realize how lucky you are growing up on a farm? And I think lots of people probably think, oh, why, that's not lucky. Like, you'd want to grow up in a big city that's vibrant and there's so many things on and so much stuff you can do. But I honestly think that you learn more in life by being out in nature, doing the dirty work, and just experiencing, like exactly what you did as a child.
Absolutely. And you can always live in a city. That is what most people do. You can't just walk out to, buy a piece of land and start a farm. It doesn't work that easy. It's complicated. There's lots to learn. It takes a lot of money, especially a grain farm. You need some pretty complicated equipment. And I always say, if I didn't grow up the daughter of a farmer, I would have loved to grow up the daughter of a fisherman, because I think it's a similar lifestyle, just in different ways. It's the hard work. It's the going out and getting your own food or selling it or whatever you need to do. Because I can always live in a city and I can always live a city lifestyle. But you don't always have access to a lifestyle like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's so true. And actually, you've discussed planning and looking to the next season and hardships and hard times. Just going back to your budgeting, your first time you did budgeting, obviously you've refined that whole process now. What was in the beginning, what was the process you used to identify that's the kind of amount that I'm going to need for my travels?
It was a little bit of guesswork. And so what I always tell people is, if you want something bad enough, you can do it. You just need to make the choices. So for me, I chose travel. Some of my friends chose investing in real estate and a new home, or they wanted a new vehicle. And some friends, they love to go out for coffees and eat food and go to music concerts, right? Those are their choices. So I wanted to save for travel, so I made it my number one priority. And that meant making certain decisions. So actually, even today, the car I drive is 21 years old. And this summer, I actually needed to replace the alternator on it. And I couldn't afford to pay a mechanic to do it for me. So I actually went to Canadian Tire, where I could pick up an alternator, found which one I needed, brought it home. And then Dad, thankfully, has gifted me all the tools I need. Being a farmer, I have everything I need here. And I actually changed my own alternator in my car in the parking lot of my apartment building. Yeah. But I needed to do that because that's how I save money for travel. So my car isn't the newest one. I live pretty frugally. I don't go out for coffees with friends, or very rarely. I don't go to eat meals. I'll instead say to them, hey, instead of a coffee, let's go for a walk along the river. And it saves both of us money. It's not just me. It saves them money too. So I made some tough choices. Yeah, do I want to go on this weekend trip with friends? Of course I do. Do I want to go to this concert? Of course. But I had to miss some of those because I knew the payoff would be worth it for me in the future. And at first I didn't know how much money to budget. Like, what do I need to live on for a month of traveling? And my first trip was to Australia, which is actually quite expensive to travel in. And so I had, at that point, I think I had saved up $14,000. And I said, well, that should be good enough for 6 months. It's a little more than $2,000 a month, but I do need to pay for my flight there and back. And then I really tried hard when I was in Australia and New Zealand to live within that budget. So clever ways, like I actually ended up doing a skydive, a bungee jump, a helicopter ride, and a jet boat ride in New Zealand, all in one day, because it was so cheap to do it all at once. And I think it was, it was $300 or $400, and I had managed to find a $50 off coupon, and then I could exchange the Canadian dollar to the New Zealand dollar. So I think I paid maybe $300 for that entire experience, versus some people pay $300 for just a skydive. So it's just being very creative and taking advantage of deals that I could find. Like even now, when I go to the grocery store, I take coupons with me, or I price match things, and I make sure I buy things on sale. I don't go to the mall to shop for new clothes. I either wait for them to go on sale, and I only buy what I actually need. So lots of the clothes in my closet are, 5 years old, but if you pick certain pieces, it still looks good even 5 years later.
So it sounds like you.
Right. So some people would hear about that lifestyle. Sorry, go ahead.
No, so it sounds like basically you sort of started doing minimalism before it was like in fashion, basically.
I guess a little bit. I still look around and feel like I have a lot of stuff, but a little bit, yeah. You live a basic lifestyle, so you can. For me, having different experiences is so important. That is like the center of my life. I want to consume experiences for my entire life. That is what makes me happy. That's what makes me fulfilled. I could be completely broke, but if I can have these rich experiences, it fulfills me, and then I'm happy. And so you don't need a lot of stuff. But I found that it's been a big struggle too, because society says we need a lot of stuff. You need the newest, you need to look a certain way. Even on social media and Instagram, there's a certain aesthetic with it. And people want you to be beautiful and look beautiful and dress beautifully. And they don't want to see the same clothes and items in every photo. It needs to look a certain way. And I'm like, well, my life doesn't look that way. But I'm okay with that because I'm happy behind the scenes. I'm not living for what society wants. And even my lifestyle too is, I remember when I first started traveling, people are like, okay, she went on a trip, she'll come home and then she'll settle down and start real life. And people would ask me, when are you going to start real life? And I would balk at that. I would be like, what do you mean, when am I going to start real life? This is my real life. It's just different than what you're doing and different what you expect others to be doing as well. And that was a little bit hard on me because people had these expectations they were putting on you. And it wasn't my mom or dad or anything. They were very supportive of what I was doing. They know I'm a pretty headstrong and independent woman. But other people would just be surprised at what I was doing and how I was doing it. And lots of people have asked me, do you have somebody who funds your travels? Like, do you have a rich boyfriend or husband, or where do you get your money? And they don't realize I'm just very, very smart with my money, and I make a point to spend it on travel. So there's definitely been some times over the years where it's been it's not true adversity, but it's been a struggle to say, hey, it's okay to go on this different path than what most people do. And now that I've turned it into a career and I've found success with it as a career, people now look at me and go, wow, that's inspiring. You're motivating me to go travel or explore or do this when I never thought or believed I could. So sometimes you have to push past those hurdles to get to where you need and want to be. And then people do come around to it, and then they respect you more because you fought so hard to be there as well. So that was a lot. That was a long answer to a budgeting question. But
No, I think there's so much value in there. There's so many amazing ideas in terms of, finding goals, know what you want, work your way back from there. And that's with anything, and you've got to make decisions around that. It seems really simple, but then when your day-to-day life, when you have to make those decisions, that's when it's those small decisions on a daily basis that make the big stuff. So, I think, you've done a really amazing job of doing that. And, and talking about your business side of it now, was that always an idea, or was that something that sort of morphed into that?
That's a good question, and actually even jumping on the name of my blog. So my blog is called The Lost Girl's Guide to Finding the World, and there's several reasons for that. And one is just frivolous in that I happen to lose most of my things when I'm traveling. So I'm always calling somewhere to be like, hey, do you have my passport? Because I can't find it right now. So there's a little bit of a lighthearted side to it. But talking about where I am now and where I've come from, I make it sound really easy. It's like, oh, well, I just did this, 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 and this and made it happen. But the whole reason my name is The Lost Girl's Guide to Finding the World is because I had no idea what I was doing in life. So yes, I was, I had a degree as a teacher and I could be a high school biology teacher, but that wasn't what I wanted. The thought of sitting in a classroom made me feel like I was being boxed in to teaching a certain way from a certain curriculum, and I didn't have the creativity I wanted for it. And so I had always said if somebody or something came along while I was traveling, I would be willing and open to stop and do it. And I didn't realize the actual act of traveling was what had come along to change my life. So I actually started my blog at the end of the year in 2013, and it was just a passion project. I had so many people asking me about travel, how to do it, how to afford it. that instead of just sending everybody individual messages, it was easy to put it in my little corner of the internet. And I did it just for fun. And even I do monetize it to an extent. I work with brands that align with my beliefs and values, but it still is my passion project. Most of my blogs going up on it are just me writing it because I want to share it with people. And so I started blogging, and I still didn't even know where that was going to take me. And I got really fortunate. This was actually during my 5th year of traveling. I was actually in South Africa when it happened, but I applied for a job back in Saskatchewan with the government of Saskatchewan, and it's called the Saskatchewan Wanderer. It's a bit of a mouthful, but they wanted to hire me as their official travel blogger for the entire province. And it was an amazing position because it's government backed. It was sponsored by the Ministries of Agriculture, Economy, Parks, Culture and Sports, and Tourism Saskatchewan, and then CAA, which is the Canadian Automobile Association. The Saskatchewan portion of CAA were in on that partnership. So that was me taking advantage of an opportunity to really grow what I had started to build and make it bigger. And for me, it was a year contract, and this was in 2015. I took advantage of that to network and connect and like hustle as hard as I knew how. Like I don't drink coffee, but that year I would be drinking 3 or 4 coffees in a row just to stay awake and keep going because I was maxing everything. My whole philosophy for that year was you can only say yes to opportunities this year. Like there's no saying no. You got to say yes to it because that will get you somewhere. And it paid off. I got well known throughout the province. Like people recognize me, know who I am, and they've read some of my work, and then opportunities started coming to me. That being said, I still hustle for a lot of opportunities. So people always think, oh, they approach you and all of a sudden you're getting all this money. And it's like, no, I actually pitched them. I sent them my ideas and how we could work together. And then they came back and we made something work. So it's still, people might look at my lifestyle and think it's successful, but behind the scenes, I'm still, treading water as fast as I can underneath the surface to make sure I keep building it. But it's been a long process, and you just work at it every day and every day. And I view it as an actual staircase, right? Every day, there's the chance that I might be able to get to the next step. And sometimes you go down a couple of steps. But this past year, and I'm coming into my 3rd year of business, and I can just see the steps I've taken in my business. And it's a good feeling. I'm still small, still growing, still trying to make it work, but it's happening. And that's like a really fantastic feeling to know that I've created something out of my passion, and now I get to share that with people.
Super interesting, and wow, super well done. Very, very, very inspiring indeed. So when when you started all of this, or when you talk a lot about hustle, like was there someone that you followed who kind of inspired you from a business perspective, from a social media perspective? How did you learn the ropes, or was it just literally finding your own way?
I wish I could say, I followed these 4 people and they've inspired me, but I didn't really. Not that I don't try and learn everywhere I can. And people always recommend books to me, say, go read this, go listen to these podcasts. And I do some of that. But I've reached out to other members of my community and said, hey, I don't actually know how to do this. Can you help me a little bit with this? And most people are always willing to give back and help others because they've received help in the past. And even a really perfect example is when I got hired for the Saskatchewan Wanderer job. So you're required to shoot video, interview people, understand how to use cameras, video editing software, and blogging, marketing, and you need to be a personality. So there's a lot of things that you need to do. And I didn't actually know a lot about shooting video. So I flew home from Africa, and I came home on a Friday, and I needed to be in another city for work that Monday morning. I literally went to the library, and I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with them, but in Canada, we have these big yellow books, and they're like the book of dummies. So like the dummy's guide to learning totally. Whatever you need to do. So I went to the library and I took out DSLR video and filmmaking for dummies. And I read the whole book in a weekend because I knew nothing about making video. And I had to shoot a 2-minute video at a brewery. And again, I didn't know the kind of shots. I had to Google how to use 3 different microphones because I had no idea. And I didn't know the shots I needed. And that video probably took me 20 hours to put together. It was a 2-minute video and it took 20 hours because I had to learn how to use Adobe Premiere Pro. Like, it was so much of a learning curve. But you can do that. You can actually do that if you want to do it bad enough. And like, Google's my best friend. Anytime I need to learn something, I just go on and Google it and read about it, because somebody else has already been through that same problem and can share their knowledge with me. So although I don't credit specific people for where I am today, I think it's just like a whole community of people who have added their advice to my life, whether they know it or not.
Yes, that's such a great story, actually, that you can do it. Yes. Are you prepared to do it? And yeah, super cool.
And it's stressful and it's hard. And, you know, I was near tears thinking, I'm not going to be able to put this video together. But then I was like, just slow down, take a minute. You can do this. You got this. Just take your time and figure it out. But it was a little bit scary sometimes.
So what sort of, what stuff did you put in this video, like, to make them choose you?
So that was, I actually ended up writing a script for it. And I was in Madagascar at the time when I shot the application video. And so I wrote a script. And again, I knew nothing about being on camera, but I knew I just needed to be personable and friendly. And I remember walking down a street. I can't even remember the city I was in Madagascar. And I was walking down the street and people were giving me the weirdest looks while I was trying to film on my camera. And you know, you're talking to your camera and you keep screwing up and you're like, you're swearing behind the scenes because you just can't say it right. And so I did the application video was a 2-minute video to say, this is who I am. This is what I do. These are things I'm passionate about. And then this is how I can help you. I can be your brand representative, and these are the reasons why I can. And so I knew the 4 ministries that I was targeting my message to. So Ministry of Agriculture, of course, I'm going to tie in my agricultural background with that. So I had some clips of me sitting in the combine and canola being unloaded from the combine into the grain truck and included that. And in the interview, they actually asked me about that. They were like, oh, was that canola that was in that clip? So I made sure to target every one of the ministries and tell them how I could help them get their message across to everybody. But then I included my own personality. So I included a shot of me scuba diving because that's one of my biggest passions. And then I was actually hiking and camping in a national park in Madagascar. So I was like, I really love camping, which isn't maybe the prime message of being the Sasquander, but it is an aspect to it. And they knew I would be approaching it from, that's my personality. And I'm an outdoor adventure traveler, blogger, lover of nature. And so that was what I was going to bring to the table for them. And they hadn't seen that yet. So yeah, it was just a combination of a variety of different things.
And I mean, I can imagine it's quite like a big competition. There must be lots of other people sending in their entries as well. So it's a prestigious thing to win, I'm sure.
Yeah, and it was an interesting process. There's kind of a story behind the selection process, too. So they had about 60 or 65 applicants the year I applied, which isn't a ton, but it's enough. And only 5 get an interview. And so thankfully, my video was strong enough that they gave me an interview. But then I was actually in Swaziland at the time. And I'm not back in Canada, and I needed them to see me in person because just over the phone sometimes isn't good enough. You need them to see you on camera as a person. So we decided to set up a Skype interview. So it was 7 p.m. my time, and it was 11 a.m. back at home in Canada. And I had a SIM card. I had a South African one, and in retrospect, I should have just driven back into South Africa just because better access to internet, hotels, everything like that. But I went around looking for the highest speed of internet that I could find. And so I went hotel to hotel testing their internet. And then I was just going to get a room at a hotel, but I ended up renting a conference room. And I think it was like a 4-star hotel in Swaziland. And I don't think there are many 4-star hotels there. So I rented this conference room, and they were supposed to give me free internet with it, but they were late giving me the internet. So I was supposed to have this interview at 7 or 7:30, and like the time had passed and I still didn't have internet. And when I finally logged in, they had already called me on Skype. So I just immediately called them back because I was like, oh my goodness. And then there was no audio. So we have a Skype interview and there's no audio, but they didn't realize that you could Skype chat. So they weren't typing back to me. They were literally just writing on a piece of paper, holding it up to the computer screen, but
wow.
moving it. So it was digitizing it. So I couldn't read what they were saying. And so I had given them my Swaziland cell phone number but then I forgot it was in airplane mode, which just makes it even more ridiculous. So they couldn't even call me because it was in airplane mode. But then I was like, oh, figure it out. And then they called me. But then to add to that, I only had 30 minutes of credit on my cell phone. And I had actually gone into the cell phone supplier to say, hey, if I'm calling Canada or Canada's calling me, how does it use up my time? But when we looked at the sheet for countries that you could call from the country, Canada wasn't even on the list. So I couldn't know. So when they called me and we're doing the Skype interview visually through Skype on the phone, and then I had to interrupt them once they finally got going to be like, hey, I actually only have 30 minutes of airtime on my cell phone. So do you think we could keep this interview to 30 minutes? And it was so cheeky to say, but they needed to know that. And I had met a friend in South Africa who was traveling with me. So I was actually Facebook messaging him being like, Christian, can you go buy me more airtime for my cell phone and just add it to my phone? So it was like a bunch of multitasking. And then I used that to my advantage because I was just like, hey, welcome to traveling and what it's like sometimes. This is a reason why you want to hire me, because I can take situations that could potentially be disastrous and turn it into something that works and then still laugh and smile and joke about it. So it was quite the process. And then they called me. I was actually on safari in Kruger National Park, and I got an email on my cell phone that I had the job. So I had to book a flight back to Canada. So it was pretty exciting.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you never know how the way things turn out. You just never know if it's going to be a benefit or not. And you just, is it like one of our other guests says, is it happening to me or for me? And,
exactly.
And I think it's actually really, really true. And you used that totally to your advantage, and that's probably helped you get the position, So, you're in Africa at this stage. I read somewhere that you'd seen a lioness attack or eat a wildebeest. How was that? Where was that? And that must have been quite an experience.
That was incredible. So that was actually kind of another long story, but when I flew home from Africa, I booked a return flight because it was $300 cheaper. There's another budgeting travel tip. So I booked a return flight, but I lined it up with my other return flight I had from Africa in April. So I flew home in January. I wasn't supposed to go home till April. So then I had 2 weeks in April where I had these 2 return flights. And once I actually started the job, I asked them if I could go back to Africa for 2 weeks in April throughout that year. And they didn't say no. I sound pretty cheeky, but if you don't get something if you don't ask for it. Right. I was fully prepared not to go back, but they did let me go back. And so my mom came with me, and we were in Tanzania, and we were on safari in the Serengeti. And it was her 60th birthday as well. So it was a really special thing to share with my mom. And we were just on safari. We lucked out with the private safari. Nobody else was going because it was kind of in the quieter season. And there were a few lions just hanging around right near the road, and there were some wildebeest running past, and literally like feet from our vehicle, this lioness went and took down this wildebeest, and we watched the male lion come in and the females take it down. And there was actually a cheetah in the background too, who was kind of watching and waiting, and just a really powerful moment in nature. And again, growing up on a farm, you view animals differently. Yes, you love and adore them, but you also understand the value of, I guess, the circle of life, right? And as much as I didn't want to see that wildebeest getting taken down, I understand the lions need it to survive too. So a lot of people would be, turned off by an experience like that, but I found it was a very powerful moment just to see kind of the rawness of nature and how they survive in the world too. It was pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, that's amazing. You're super lucky to see that. Yeah, no, and like you said, we're all part of this ecosystem. So, and we need to survive. And unfortunately, that means at some point, someone or something needs to die, because we need to live and we need that energy. So, Ash, you head off quite young when you went on your first trip, and you like you said, you were coming home to work, in the summer months, and then going again. Surely, there must have been some like sort of tough moments there as a young girl, like 2 things, I guess. One is missing your family, and the second one is actually going on a solo trip as a girl. That takes someone quite brave. And how did you deal with both of those scenarios?
So I'm pretty honest about it every time, even today. Every time I get on an airplane by myself to go to a new country, new location on my own, it is terrifying. I am always, always scared about it. So I don't want people to think that I, never worry or I'm just brave. No, it terrifies me, and that's okay. The important thing is that I'm going and doing it anyway. And my dad gave me a really good piece of advice because 6 months is a long time to be away. You have a lot to figure out before you go. And I'm usually in a panic the night or two before. And I'm always worried what it's going to be like. And he just says to me, he says, Ashlyn, he's like, you don't have to go for 6 months. You can go. And if you get there and it's 2 days in and you're like, this is not for me, I do not want to be here. He's like, book a flight and come back home. You have nothing to prove to anybody else. It's what's right for you. And then that would make me feel better. I'd get on the airplane. I'd still be terrified. And then I'd show up in this other country and realize how amazing and wonderful it is. And it's still scary. There's, differences in culture and language and money and food, and everything is weird and strange. And I remember showing up in Vietnam. I crossed the border from Laos, actually, after we left you and Clive. And we crossed into Vietnam, and it's a very different country and culture. And I didn't even know how to eat the food. The woman at the restaurant I was in had to show me how to put the food together and how to eat it because I didn't know. And there's moments where you feel very, very vulnerable. But those are the moments where you have to dig in and make the best of it and make it work. And you have to say to yourself, I am doing this because it's going to make me a better person. I'm going to have more understanding of the world. I am going to be stronger and better by coming through and getting past that comfort zone. So I am always terrified when I go on trips. And there's different things you can do to help that. So like preparing, talking to other people who have been there, making sure your hotel is booked before you show up. I'm usually in the airport booking my first night of accommodation. But, doing some prep work before you go always helps. And understanding that it's okay to feel uncomfortable. That's not a bad thing. So I think that's a really important thing. And in terms of safety as a woman, of course, there have been a few moments where you're like, I don't know if this situation is okay, or I need to get away from it, or I need to diffuse the situation. But I have literally traveled the world for almost 4 years in total. And those bad experiences are less than 1% of my entire experiences, because 99.9% of them are amazing and wonderful. But you need to trust your gut. I think that's one of the most important things. Is people ask me, and there's all these safety precautions you can take and put into place. But at the end of the day, if you don't feel comfortable with something, listen to it and get out of there or change it. Or, if you're uncomfortable on a bus, don't worry about the $60 ticket that it costs you for that ride. Get off the bus, get your gear, get off the bus, and rebook the next bus if you need to. I had a situation in Argentina where I was the only person on the bus, and there's 2 drivers because it was a really long haul. And the one driver just would not stop harassing me. He would come, he would sit next to me, he wanted to talk to me, and there's nobody else on this bus. And I don't know, my Spanish is okay, but I'm nowhere near fluent. And you're in the middle of Argentina, it's a big country. What would stop them from pulling the bus over? You'd be 5 minutes late at the next town, but nobody would have a clue what happened. And so I actually had to think, do I need to get off this bus at the next bus stop? And then thankfully other people got on the bus, so I didn't have to. But I was so uncomfortable, and I was legitimately worried. And I had a multi-tool because I was cutting my cheese for my sandwich while I was on the bus. And I had my multi-tool with me in my hand, prepared if something bad did happen. I just felt uncomfortable. Something wasn't right. But thankfully it did work out. So it's just listening to that and knowing it's okay to step up and speak out or take action. If you're on public transportation in a city and somebody is groping you, speak up, say something, call attention to it, because people are amazing and they will step up and help you when you need help. I have never not been offered help when I've needed it while traveling. Sometimes you just actually have to ask people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, time and again, when I hear stories like that, it's just amazing to me how much you can translate experiences with traveling like that into real life, just everyday life, being uncomfortable, growing from those experiences, learning from experiences, and then you just take that back into your life. And that's, like you said in the beginning, the cliche of it, I guess you just grow really fast because you just learn so much so quickly. Part of, being alone, you did a really long hike all on your own, 120 kilometers. how do you deal with that solitude, being totally alone for I don't know how long that must have taken you, a little while, I'd imagine. Or was it purely, and is it sort of a meditative thing for you? Are you being very aware of your surroundings during that time? Or was it more about, I want to get through this to, get to the end? What sort of experience was it for you?
So I love people. At the end of the day, I need to surround myself with people. So I did this 120-kilometer hike in the backcountry, no cell service, bear country. My first night, I had a bear in my campsite, and I didn't know what to do because you don't want to have an issue with a bear. It was a black bear, so it's not as dangerous as a grizzly, but it's still a bear by yourself with no cell service. And so I was hiking this 120-kilometer trail, and I was terrified. You're quiet hiking by yourself. You're not making much noise. And so I would sing to myself on the trail. I would blow a whistle around, every corner just to startle any wildlife that could be nearby. Or I was listening to an audiobook out loud on my cell phone. And it was really hard and it was really challenging for me. And that first night when I was camping, and it was colder than I expected. I had a +13 sleeping bag and the temperature got to below 0 degrees. So I was freezing cold in my tent. So you couldn't move because you were just huddled. And I was worried about this bear in the campsite. So I wasn't sleeping well. And that night, I made journal notes on some paper I had. And I was like, is this dumb of me to do? Am I actually taking too much of a risk doing this? Because if I break my leg, if something happens to me, I can't get help fast enough to save myself because people expect me to be on this trail for, 4 or 5 days. And I was like, am I just being dumb or have I adequately prepared myself for what I need to do and how I need to do it? And I was thinking I could easily not hike this trail. I could hike back out to my car. I could drive to different points and hike different sections of the trail. And then I thought, no, that's not who I am, and that's not helping me grow. And this is, again, that comfort zone and pushing myself outside of it. I was like, I'm adequately prepared. I have everything I need. I've touched in with the park office. They know I'm out here. My parents know where I am. I have maps. I have everything I need. And I did struggle through the entire trek just because, I had a skunk chase me down the trail with its tail up too. And you're running for your life because you don't want to get sprayed by a skunk. You giggle about it afterwards, but in that moment, you're just like, oh my God, I had a beaver that was acting really aggressive, slapping its tail on the water. I was trying to get water for supper and it was after dark, and beavers have huge teeth and they can be quite territorial. And then I ran into, there's a total of 6 bears, several of them which were further away, but there was a mom and a cub on the trail, and the trees and foliage were so dense I couldn't actually hike around them because they say either just turn around, hike out, or hike around them. And I was 9 kilometers into this section and I was running out of daylight, and there's this cub and this mom on the trail, and I stepped out and her and I locked eyes. She saw me, I saw her. The cub's in the middle of the trail, and I actually had my backpack on, and I had an air horn with me because an outdoor friend of mine had said sometimes you can just scare them off with loud noises. So immediately my hand started shaking, and I reached for the air horn in the back of my backpack and pulled the cap off and blasted it. And the bears didn't even twitch. Their ears, nothing. So I was like, okay, the air horn, there's nothing. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna pull out my bear spray, because I don't know what's going to happen here. And they weren't exhibiting any signs of aggression, but I was close enough and she knew I was there. I was just being careful. And as I was reaching for my bear spray, my feet cracked on the underbrush and cracked a twig underneath. And that cracking twig spooked the cub, and the cub ran off the trail, and then the mom followed. Wow, so geez. It was funny. I had this air horn that I thought would scare them, and really it was just making noise that scared them off. And there were moments, because you can never anticipate what you're going to run into or what's going to happen. And I was shaking. I was terrified. But now you feel more confident in yourself. And now if I run into a bear on a trail another time, it's still scary, yes, but you have more experience with it. So you know how to react or what you can do to kind of slow it down. But yeah, 5 days in the wilderness by yourself, it wasn't easy, but it was wonderful to do and push myself outside that comfort zone. So,
geez, a story like that, I always think it's such an intense thing that you went through. And then you just want to I need to call someone and just tell them this, what just happened. But there in that scenario, it's kind of interesting to think of that you just be wow, it's all you. Then you have to process that all on your own in a way. And I guess that's part of the whole experience. But it's kind of interesting to think of how we are so, we're human beings. We want to like share experiences. And I guess that's part of the whole thing of being on your own sometimes as well, and learning from that. But really cool, actually.
Yeah, and so that was the first time I had done something to that extent. I'd done lots of overnight hiking and trips all around the world, but I've always had a guide or I've had other people, and so that was definitely pushing me outside my comfort zone. And it's a love-hate relationship with it, right? Like you love what it gives you, but you hate it in that moment, and you can't wait to get to the other side of it. But yeah.
And does your dad or mom worry about you, I guess, on some of these trips, or what do they say?
They're parents, so of course they always are worried about you. I've been really lucky. My parents have visited me in several countries now. I've been to 6 continents with my mom. I was hoping she could join me in Antarctica, but it just didn't quite work out with her. But they've seen how capable I am in these other countries. And even they've spent quite a bit of time in South America with me when they don't know the language, but I can communicate enough to get us around, that they realize how careful and prepared and informed I am. So that makes them feel better. But even this hiking experience on the Boreal Trail, like I called my mom and she was kind of a little bit upset with me. She was just scared, right? And I was scared too, but she just wanted me to be safe and to come out the other end. So they support me because they always have and they always will. But I do know behind the scenes that they are nervous and worried about me. And even sometimes I would just call mom up and be like, you'll never guess what I did today. And then tell her afterwards versus telling her before.
Yeah. And tell her like half the story.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. I saw this little cub today.
Yeah, it was so cute. Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you think like growing up with a family of 3 brothers helped, I guess, like in inverted commas, like toughen you up, or for these travels and the life you live now?
So I always kind of jokingly say, if I wasn't doing it as good as my 3 older brothers, it was because I was doing it better than them.
Okay, cool.
But that's my competitive nature, and it's not like my brothers and I were ever really that competitive, but I always wanted to be as good as them and do as good as them and perform like them. And like I'm fairly active and outdoorsy too. It's just naturally who I am. So that helps as well into sports and stuff. But I definitely think I always felt a little bit challenged just to, as a girl, you got to step up to the plate and deliver when you have 3 older brothers. But they all respect what I do and stuff like that too. So it was always just a friendly competition. But I think that really played into it, which is kind of a little bit unfortunate that, just kind of the perspective of women and that's one of my favorite things in my social media world is saying, hey, I'm a woman out doing all these crazy outdoor adventure activities. So you absolutely can do it too, because I am just an average person. I am probably not as good as most people at doing things. I'm just willing to get out and make mistakes. And I joke with friends, like I'm forever actually stitching up holes in my like yoga pants and leggings because I fall so often learning new activities, like literally falling on the snow skiing or tripping and falling while hiking. And I actually kind of love that, because if you're not making mistakes, are you trying hard enough, right? Are you putting yourself out there and pushing yourself? Because falling is a sign that you push yourself too far, right? Or, and I think that means there's room for growth in that. And failure teaches you a lot of things too. So I'm learning how to whitewater canoe. So this 2 summers ago, I did a tandem course, and this past summer I did a solo whitewater canoeing course. And it was me and 4 other men, and they were doing a tandem course. And I remember trying to keep up to them paddling, and they have the strength of 2 men in a canoe, and I'm, 1 woman paddling, and we'd be paddling up some of the currents, and they were all wonderful and they were super helpful. But I remember thinking, how did they get up there as I'm struggling to get up the current paddling in my little canoe? And the one day I was almost to tears because I felt like I couldn't piece it together, but I know how I work. And I was like, Ashlyn, that's how you do it. You struggle and you're stubborn, and then you give yourself a break and you come at it the next day and things are easier. You're still not an expert, but it's not as hard as it was the day before. So stick it out, keep pushing, keep paddling up that literal river and figurative river. and you'll get there. And, you know, I even did a little video and post, and I'd love to do some more about the experience, saying like, learning is hard. It is never easy, and you are always going to struggle. And remember, when you see somebody else doing something and they make it look easy, they started from the beginning too, and they struggled too. So I always try to be really honest about that with people. I am just an average, ordinary person, and I'm just pushing myself to go do these things, and you can too.
Jeez.
I would say average is you know, based on the life you lived, is probably not a fair assumption. But also, yeah. So I mean, you've experienced so many amazing things, right? Like literally reading your blog is insane, and it just kind of, if you've got that travel bug in you, you know, like say I do and Craig does, you just want to go out. So we would definitely want to speak a bit more about these things, but you must have a big passion for nature, I guess, you know, and probably conservation and stuff too, and all types of nature. I know you were in the Galapagos for a couple of months, learning to be a dive master. First of all, I mean, from the photos, it just looks like the most beautiful place in the world. And the variety of animals and the sort of exoticness of the animals is sort of off the charts. Can you just talk us about that, us through that experience of what you did there?
So I took advantage of a really cool opportunity. So as a biology teacher, I remember being in grade 10 and learning about Charles Darwin, and he's one of my heroes. You know, the theory of evolution, and he just brought so much to the world in terms of his adventuring and his research. And I remember learning about him in grade 10 and thinking, oh my goodness, one day I want to go to the Galapagos Islands. And I was in Ecuador. I was on a 6-month stint in South America, and I had the opportunity to go to Ecuador. And I just originally went for a 7-day cruise, and I was going to do a day or two of scuba diving and then go back to the mainland. But it turned out I could change my flight for free, and I could finish my professional level of scuba diving with Patty and become a dive master and do my rescue course. And I thought, what better opportunity as a biology and animal lover than to experience the Galapagos Islands and then still learn something while I'm there as well. And there's so many endemic species in the Galapagos Islands, and it's such a fragile ecosystem. And even the influx of tourism is an issue too, right? Tourism has a double-edged sword. A little bit is a wonderful thing for a country and a community, but too much of it, and it actually starts harming, you know, even just the natural resources of the area. And so it was wonderful because every day I got to scuba dive with dozens of hammerhead sharks every single day. And there's lots of other wonderful endemic species that you get to see both above the ground or above the water and below. And I know there are issues with illegal fishing in the area and how it affects the ecosystems. And even just in this world that we live in with global warming and the severe weather storms, you think about your role in the world and in the environment, and even your role as a traveler. So how can I make a smaller footprint when I'm traveling? What are the choices I can make that will leave less of an impact? So something as small as, I will go into a country, in many countries you do need to buy bottled water, but I will usually buy a big bottle of water and then keep it for several days. You know, I'm not always buying new bottles of water. Sometimes I take my own water treatment in with me so I don't have to continually buy things. Or even if you can just drink out of the tap, I carry a water bottle so I don't always have to be in the store buying it. I try to eat locally, right? I'm not going to go into a country and order a steak and burgers in a country where that's not what they usually eat. If their staple is rice or beans or whatever it may be, I'm going to eat locally because it's easier to source that food there. Plus, that's part of the experience and the culture too. And you know, I take the local bus. I sometimes I'll rent a car, of course, but the majority of the time I'm hopping on a bus with the other locals. And I consider, you know, do I need to take this flight to get somewhere, or could I enjoy the landscape on a bus? And sure, it takes a few more hours, but I might have a really cool experience on the bus and I get to see more of the actual country. So in a world where travel has become increasingly more accessible to anybody and everybody, I think travelers do need to take a minute and think about how they're traveling and then their interactions with wildlife while they're traveling. And I admit I'm guilty of this as well. I've interacted with wildlife in a way that I'm embarrassed about now, but I didn't know better. So I think educating people about that is important. So, don't hold sloths or go into tiger temples, and consider how you're interacting with an elephant, right? Look at the organization who is offering an experience and look at their values and philosophies behind that as well. And if they don't have a statement about that, you might want to avoid it, versus somebody who's all about the rehabilitation of animals and getting them back into their natural setting. So there's a lot that travelers can do to think about. It can be eco-friendly.
Yeah, that's such a good message. I think people, like you said, often just don't even think about it. I hadn't really considered that. And I think even just hearing that is like, next time you go and do that, you might just want to just do a little, the bare minimum of research into those kind of things. And I think that's a really massive benefit to everyone, because we all want to enjoy this stuff with animals and nature and these kind of things. But, the sustainability of all those things is, that's the big question. And learning to care for other creatures and stuff is massive. We're not just observers out there. We need to be part of it, But I must say the Galapagos is definitely on my bucket list for the same sort of reasons that you were mentioning. How do you sort of put together your list of where you want to go and your sort of bucket list of things you want to do? Because there's so much to see and do and experience.
So before there was Instagram, I find Instagram makes the world more accessible. And sometimes Instagram is a little bit travel porny. You see these amazing destinations, and all of a sudden what was a hidden gem is now just overrun by hundreds, if not thousands of people a day. But a lot of my inspiration came from photographs in magazines or things I'd stumbled across on the internet, and recommendations by other travelers. So I wanted to go to Angkor Wat because a fellow traveler had mentioned it to me. I didn't know anything about it, Googled it, discovered what an amazing set of historical temples they are, and decided to go. But I've also discovered there is no value in traveling just for traveling. I need an intent and purpose behind it. So I actually went to Costa Rica just because I had a bit of time to kill. And I regretted, not that I regret going, but I regretted that I didn't have a deeper purpose for why I was there. I showed up and I felt a little bit lost because I was like, I could do all these cool things, but what purpose is there? Why am I doing it? So now I only travel to destinations and locations that have something that I specifically want to do. So maybe it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. That's a big player into how I select locations. I love to visit as many UNESCO World Heritage Sites as possible. Maybe there's an amazing overland trek that I want to do, or a waterfall, or usually it's based around something natural and something outdoorsy. And maybe there's an experience there that I can get only in that country. So, even going on safari in South Africa, there are so many amazing parks, both private and public, that you can access. So that was a big player into going to South Africa. And I did go, I wasn't able to get down to Durban and go scuba diving, but I want to come back to go scuba diving. And, there's just certain locations in each country that I want to personally experience. And then I try to make it happen if I can.
And if you have to pick 5 places of where you visited so far, I know this is like the worst question, impossible question to answer, but what are your what are 5 of your greatest places? Not greatest, but what stand out?
So I loved Madagascar because it's a little bit more difficult to get to. You got to take a fairly long flight. The flight's expensive, and there's not as much tourism as, say, Mauritius off the coast of Africa. So I loved Madagascar. I love New Zealand because New Zealand is where I fell in love with outdoor adventure travel. That really did change my life. And I love the Patagonia region of South America, so both Chile and Argentina. Again, just incredible outdoor treks, experiences, glaciers. And I really loved Ecuador, again, partly because of the Galapagos Island experience, and another wonderful outdoor destination. And then a 5th place, there's so many and they're all so different. I'm not going to choose a place for my 5th one. I'm going to choose a style of travel. I love road tripping with people. So I do often travel by bus, and there are places you pass that you can't stop and visit. But when you have your own vehicle and you're sharing the experience with somebody you care about, you can stop anywhere and you can make adventures happen anywhere. So I love to be able to travel road trip style, usually camping on a road trip. So I'd say those are my 5 favorite places and styles of travel.
That's cool. I remember.
That's a decent, well answered.
Yeah. I actually remember you showed me a photo of you like in New Zealand. It was like somewhere in the North Island on some dunes doing like a jump, and you just caught the sort of sunset. And I was like, whoa, that's pretty cool. And that New Zealand is a beautiful country, that's for sure. Absolutely picturesque. So when you travel as well, you have a sort of cool habit that you do, or tradition, should we say, that you make sure in every country, I think it is, or possibly city, that you like to try out the local McDonald's. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I don't even know how this started, but I eat a Big Mac in every country I go to. And I don't even I eat McDonald's here or there, but it's not like I'm always at it in Canada. I didn't have my first Big Mac until I was in university even, but it's kind of a little slice of North American culture. I can go into McDonald's. I've brushed my teeth in their bathroom. I've booked flights on their free Wi-Fi, and you can always get a standard meal that you know what to expect, because sometimes you just want a piece of home or something that you're familiar with. And so I just started eating Big Macs in McDonald's around the world, and then it became sort of a thing. And it's really tough when you get to Europe because the countries are so close together. You're like, I just ate a Big Mac 2 days ago, I don't need another one. But it's also a cool experiment as well, because there's the Big Mac index, right? Yeah. And so I've tracked the price of Big Macs in every country I've been to, and they range everywhere from, I think the cheapest has been $3.30 in like Malaysia and the Philippines, to as much as, I think Australia was one of the most expensive. I converted all to American currency at the time. So Australia and a few locations in Europe have been $9 to $10. And so it's a standard Big Mac with a regular fries and a regular Coke. Nothing is upsized. And then I just like to eat it, see if there's a taste difference, and then see the difference in price of it as well. It's a goofy little, thing I do, but it's kind of fun too.
But I think it's cool because it creates a benchmark that most people around the world can kind of identify. Like if you say you're in Madagascar and you're experiencing this really exotic thing, I can't almost identify with that in any way. But if you have this sort of a common thing that the two people can sort of meet at from there, and then your whole experience around where you're at, and then there's something in common, I think it's a really cool idea. Like, I can understand what you mean by that. I've had a Big Mac before.
Yeah, and it surprised me how much people actually enjoy it. And I haven't updated the post in a long time. Like I probably have a dozen or more countries that I need to add into that blog. But people always giggle about it or send me links about McDonald's in the news, and people comment on my little Big Mac addiction. But yeah, it's nice to have a slice of North American home in another country.
For sure.
That's absolutely classic. So, yeah, like I was just looking at your blog, and you write, I think, every year about your top moments, and 2016, I mean, it's one of the most amazing years in terms of your top 20. I can't imagine what your top 50 was, because you must have had lots of others. The one thing the couple of things, or now looking at it, the 3 things I want to ask you about. You did a race, like the King's race, with your friend Mitch. What was that race exactly? It sounds quite hectic.
It was. So have you guys heard of the Amazing Race before?
Yeah.
So the Amazing Race, for those that might not be familiar with it, it's both a Canadian and American thing now. It's a competition where teams of 2 people will race around, usually the world, and they do all these weird little competitions everywhere they go, and you compete against the other teams to come in first. And if you come in first, and this was a smaller version of this, but in the Amazing Race, if you come in first in America, you win $1 million. In Canada, you win $250,000. So a local vehicle dealership in Saskatchewan decided to run a smaller version of it, and the prize was $10,000 that you could win. And it was probably some of the 4 most stressful days of my life, because you're in a vehicle racing around the province, and we covered a couple thousand kilometers, and you're doing everything from zip lining to constructing a teepee to doing string art to answering trivia questions. And we did have access to our cell phones for most of it, so you could GPS where you needed to go, but you're always in competition with another team. You don't know where they are. Are they ahead of you, behind you? And we actually ended up winning the race. So we won the money and won the competition, which is pretty cool, but it was stressful and hectic and amazing and wonderful, all wrapped up in one.
Are you and Mitch still mates?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, he balances my personality quite well. So we didn't even really fight on the competition or anything at all. We were pretty chill about it, and he could do all the things I couldn't do, and then I could do all the things that he wasn't able to do. So yeah.
Yeah, and I get while we I guess on the mates topic, like how do you find it with relationships in terms of, first of all, just friends, with your life as a traveler? Do you find it hard to maintain those relationships? Do people kind of maybe feel a bit ostracized or a bit jealous of what you're doing, and therefore those are maybe not as great as they can be, or is it possibly the opposite? And then also, like, I guess with, say, meeting somebody, do guys maybe feel intimidated, or, do you, what is it like from those two perspectives?
So I am very fortunate. The friends, I have a smaller friend group back at home, but I think that's more valuable because you can spend more time with them. I've been friends with most of them for years, and they understand my lifestyle, and we just literally pick up where we left off. So if I leave for 6 months and come home, we just dive right back into where life was before we left, but we catch up on everything new. And in the day and age of technology, I'm often Skype calling people, or, you send them a quick, WhatsApp message. Even when I'm traveling, my mom and I are really close. So I think we message every single day when I'm out traveling, unless I'm out of cell service, which does happen quite a bit. But technology has absolutely revolutionized how you can stay in touch with people. Which I really, really appreciate. And in terms of meeting other people are often wowed by my lifestyle, and I don't want them to feel that way. I'm not out there. I'm out there to live my life. I'm not out there to impress anybody else. So the people who I know are worth pursuing a friendship or relationship are the ones who can see me for me, and not just me for these experiences that I've had or this lifestyle that I live. Because sometimes people are just so enamored with, wow, you travel a lot, I want to do that too. How can I do that? That's not necessarily getting to know me. That's just a part of me. Because, behind the scenes, I'm not always happy and bubbly. I have tough days too. I have down days, and I need somebody who's going to understand the depth of my personality as well. So you can usually pick up on people, and sometimes I don't even tell people what I do, or they ask, and I keep it really simple, and I'm just like, oh, I'm a writer, and then it goes from there. But yeah, I want them to get to know me and not my lifestyle.
And talking about communication, I was just wondering earlier when you were talking, you've got this amazing blog which is really beautiful pics and what have you, but do you have like a family WhatsApp or like where you go, did you see, look at this pic of, like, you're just checking in with everyone like we would maybe do if we went traveling with our friends and stuff? Do you still have that sort of level, or do you just check my blog, guys?
I have some personal accounts. So I have a private Instagram account, and it's, I don't need to worry about the aesthetic. It's some of the behind the scenes things.
Yeah.
And I keep it really tightly to just my friends. If anybody wants to follow me publicly, there's that. But I do tell a lot of people, this is my private life. I'm sharing photos of my nephews and things like that. So, and then I do have, the close group of friends where you're like, hey, check this out, or what do you think of this as well. But WhatsApp is amazing for communicating with people while traveling.
Yeah, absolutely. And how do you find it? Because obviously now you're a social media influencer, you have a fantastic following, a large amount of people. Do you feel like responsible, or how do you find that when you have people reaching out to you and looking up to you?
There's definitely responsibility that comes with it. So when I post something up, I am fact checking it, because I don't want to put something out there that is incorrect or not right. So I'm always double checking or letting people know, this was my experience. This isn't fact. I need people to be clear about that. And because you can never imagine the ways that people interpret things too. You put something out and people get something different out of it every time they look at it. But yeah, sometimes it's a scary thing knowing I'm putting something out there and so many people are reading it and being influenced it. But I stay true to who I am and what I do. So I am all about outdoor adventure. That's what you're going to see on my posts. And it's honestly, a lot of the stuff is day-to-day stuff. So right now I'm working through like a holiday to-do list because I've only been home for the last 2 of 7 Christmases. And so I'm really wanting to experience Christmas this year. So I've made it like a local, this is what I want to do at Christmas time in Saskatchewan to share with people. So it doesn't even have to be extreme outdoor adventure. But I just want people to see that there are a variety of ways that you can see the world. And this is my way of seeing it. And if you want to take inspiration from that, then that is wonderful, and I will help you do it. And you can always ask me for advice and send me questions, but realize that, there's so many cool things in this world, and I just want people to be able to explore it.
Yeah, that's great.
And how active is like your, say, community, and how do you interact with them? Like, is it, do they like message you every single day and you're like, cool, message back, or is your life too busy to do that? How do you work it?
So that is part of kind of my business model and my personal philosophy, that if somebody is going to take the time to message me, I'm going to take the time to message them back. So Facebook, I probably have the highest amount of engagement, and Facebook is different because that's an actual person behind the account. Whereas Instagram, you have all these weird Instagram handles and names, and Twitter, you don't always know who they are. But Facebook, those are real people. You can see their profile pictures and see who they are. And so when people message me, I always respond to them, or I'll point them into the direction they need to on my blog if I've already written about it. But if you comment on my post, I will comment back to you, because that's so important to engage with my community. So I have really high engagement rates. And even when I do some speaking around the province, and I tell people, if you're there, come out and say hi to me, and people will come say hi and, snap a picture with me and stuff like that too. And that's what I love. I want them to know that I'm an open person, and they should feel comfortable chatting with me like we were friends, just digital friends.
And what is your main like demographic? Like who are the main people that are like following you and enjoying your stuff?
So the majority, it skews 55 to 65% women, depending on the channel. And it ranges in age from about 25 to 44. In age. But I find like there are people who follow me because they're living vicariously, because they can't do it, or they want to watch and be a part of it that way. They don't need to go out and do it as well. And then there's the other people who follow me because they get ideas from it, and they're like, how do you do that? I want to go do that too. I didn't know you could do that there. So there is a bit of a variety, but yeah, kind of the age demographic that I fit into as well.
Yeah.
And this is obviously like becoming your sort of business, and I guess one of the future ways you'll make money. So you said that you do a lot of hustling yourself, but I guess at the size of your following, you also do have maybe brands and businesses reaching out to you to collaborate. How often does it happen, and how does it generally work? How do you choose them and say no or yes?
So the most important thing for me is that the brand or business that I'm working with aligns with what I actually believe in, or fits in with what I do. And actually, I recently did a campaign, and it was a food campaign. And I joke because I'm not a cook. I don't like cooking. I don't do indoor things. I'm all outdoor. I was like, how can I work with this company and make it fit? And then I was like, oh my gosh, I can just go purchase their food, take it to go, and I can camp with it instead of making my own camping meal, because I do hate it. And so it was quirky and it was funny. And that's actually something I was like, how have I never done this before? Why don't I take more food to go when I'm camping? Some of that comes down to budgeting. But then their campaign was also all about giving back to the community. They wanted to donate to the local food bank. And I can get behind that, anything that supports my community that way. And that was their focus of the campaign. So it let me still be me and do me stuff, but it also gave back to the community. And I wanted to share that with my followers. So making sure their messaging aligns with what I believe in. And then it's a combination of pitching them and them pitching me. So that particular business reached out to me, whereas I worked with Travel Alberta and a few different tourism boards in Medicine Hat in Alberta. And they were taking applications for that campaign. So then I sent in an application and I said, this is what I can do for you. This is my reach, my audience, why it's of value to you. Here's what we can make work together. And then that was an awesome one because I was able to have some input in what the itinerary was while I was out there. So it was very focused on things that I naturally love. So I didn't feel like I had to represent a business or company that just didn't align with what I was doing. I made sure to go to the places that I loved. And I do make an income from a variety of different ways. So sometimes it's posts on my social media. But then behind the scenes, I'm shooting promotional videos for companies. I'm doing different speaking engagements. And then I write for different magazines, tourism boards, and sometimes I'll write copy for companies' websites and businesses as well. So it's just kind of a bit of a jack of all trades in digital media content creation is how I term it.
We both got interested, obviously, as well in the speaking and communication. And do you enjoy getting up on stage? And what is the scenario? What is the like? Is it more of an inspirational thing, or do you just talk about travels, or what sort of direction do you head in with those talks?
So I have a variety of different talks that I pull pieces from, but every talk I give is always different. But so this past week, I was actually working with an agricultural organization, and it just lucked out that I happened to be from a grain farm originally and grow up on one, but they wanted to learn about social media. So they actually had a panel. There was an agricultural blogger, a food blogger, and then me, the travel blogger. And it seemed like I was going to stick out like a sore thumb, but I was sharing all my knowledge about using social media to tell stories and to connect with your audience. And so it fit in really well there. Whereas I was speaking at an oral health conference with a bunch of different dentists and dental care providers. And I remember thinking, you do know what I do, right? Like I'm a travel blogger. I know nothing about dentistry. But he wanted, it was more for a lighter talk too, but he wanted to know how I turned my passion for travel into a business. So for that one, I spoke on, 5 lessons I learned while traveling that have helped me build my business. And then I followed up with social media tips and advice at the end of it, because that's the greatest thing. Everybody's trying to use social media these days, so I can always talk about that. And then sometimes it's Saskatchewan related, adventure related, or photography related. And sometimes I go into schools, elementary schools, and I talk to students, and then I give them, I kind of tie in geography lessons and history lessons into some of the travel stories that I have. So I'm lucky that I can tap into a variety of different genres when it comes to speaking.
Yeah, that's very cool. And you were the host of the TED Saskatoon, I don't know what it is, event, I guess. Yeah. So how was that? So that's a pretty big deal. I mean, TED is huge.
Yeah, so that was cool. So if people aren't familiar, TED Talks, there are the big TED Talks, and then TEDx is for like a local TED event. And so my city of Saskatoon was holding a TEDx event back at the end of 2015, and I had actually applied to speak at it. And that's funny because a lot of people just see my success. They don't see how many times I get turned down for things too. There's always that side to it. So I didn't actually get the spot for speaking at it, but they came to me and asked if I would like to MC it, which I think is equally as cool. So myself and another co-host, we hosted the event in Saskatoon. And maybe next time when it's back in Saskatoon, maybe next time I'll be fortunate enough to talk at the event. We'll see what happens.
And I mean, those kind of things are, it's a massive boost when you do it, but it's also kind of scary to say, like, I'm actually going to apply. Like, because if they say yes, like I'm on, like it's really cool. And, but that's what it takes. Yeah.
Yeah. And it always surprises me the amount of time that it takes to put into an application, because you want to put your best version of yourself out there, and you want it to look the best and sound the best. And so you spend hours and hours and hours on an application, and you might only land 50% of the things you apply for, or 20% or 80%, you never know. And so you always have to think, do I really want this? Is it worth the time to put in and still have them tell me no? And for the most part, it's always worth it, even if I get a no back from it.
Totally. Yeah. And so just before we wrap things up here, Ash, so what can we expect from you, say, in 2018? Like, what are your plans, and beyond, of course?
So 2017 was a little bit quieter on the travel front, but I'm hoping to do maybe a little bit more traveling in 2018. And I think the biggest thing I'm working on right now is a book. It's very Saskatchewan related, but I want to put together, it's essentially a bucket list, the top outdoor adventure activities that you can do in Saskatchewan. So it's part guidebook, so you know how to go do it. And then it's part stories because I've gone out and done all of them for you to share that information with you. So things like hiking the Boreal Trail with the bears, or skydiving, or, even little things like learning how to windsurf or learning how to sail. I've connected with people across the province to be able to share their stories and my experiences with them. So I don't think it'll officially be published in 2018, but I'll be finishing the book up in the first half of this year.
Jeez, that's exciting. That I think with travel, you've created so much. You like you said, it's all hard work, a process. It's having a goal, but there's so much people can identify within their own lives, and I think books and things are also a great way to just take that to the next level. And really, some people aren't necessarily on or checking blogs and that kind of thing. So it's nice to have that aspect that's just, you can go and reference it on the bookshelf, and so many more people can get benefit from your awesome experiences. So I really think that's a sort of a way of giving back for you as well, which is awesome. And I think a lot of people will just benefit from having a chat to you today, like with us, but also all those things you're doing are very much beneficial. And there's something you can take from all of them, not just like you said, that travel porn kind of stuff where you just go, wow, that looks amazing. You're actually giving people valuable tools and practical advice. So I think people should definitely go and check more stuff out that you're doing, because it translates into real life as well, which is awesome.
Yeah, and that's what I'm hoping is I want to help people and give them the tools they need to do what they're most passionate about, because it doesn't have to be outdoor adventure travel, right? That's just how I've done it. I want them to say, hey, I can do whatever it is that I'm most passionate about, because she's doing that with her life. So yeah, always giving something practical back to everybody is always my goal.
Cool, that's really awesome. So Ash, what's the best way for people to sort of track you down, follow you, get in touch?
Absolutely. So my website is thelostgirlsguide.com, but I am most active on social media. So I would say Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and then my handle is either at The Lost Girls Guide, or on Twitter, it's just at Lost Girls Guide.
Cool stuff. Well, we'll make sure to put obviously all of this conversation in the show notes and all your contact details too. And before we go, I just want to say a big thank you for coming on the podcast as a guest. You totally are ridiculously human, on another level. It's been really great watching you over these 6 years, just travel and live such an amazing life and gain all these experiences, and also show the people the world and just give them inspiration to go out there and explore themselves and learn about the world and learn about people, and just enjoy yourself, because we as far as we know, we only here once, so it's important to make the most of it. So yeah, I just want to say thanks very much for coming on, and it's been really, really fun and fascinating chatting to you. We literally have just sort of hardly touched on any of your travels, really, you know what I mean? People have to go and look at your blog and your social media, because it is crazy the stuff you've done. It really, really is cool. So so I just wanted to say thank you from myself.
Absolutely. And thank you guys for having me on and letting me share a little bit of my story. And I love what you guys are doing too. And I'm excited to listen to your future podcasts and everybody else that you guys get on the show too, because I think it's a great way to connect with people all over the world.
Cool.
Yeah, and I'd just like to just echo what Gareth said as well. And, we're so grateful that there are people out there like yourself that we can just totally tap into an experience, and then also say those are the things that I might want to do, or certain things that you do. It's just curating the world's experiences when people do that for you in a way, and then it just makes it a lot easier to fit into your own life and go wow, I actually really want to do more of that, thanks to seeing that through what you've done. And like Gareth said, we've hardly scratched the surface of all your awesome experiences. And so I can't wait to read more of your blog, because it's really awesome. So thanks once again. And we've had a really amazing, fascinating chat. And we do appreciate everything you've done and are doing. And we look forward to seeing you in the future.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks so much. Cheers.